Really do. And so, yeah, man, it's crazy. It's crazy that we're, what, 65 days in at this point? Man, it's totally crazy. So, all right, so YouTube is up. So, hey, so here we are. So, welcome to the Weekly Shred. My name is Jim Schultz. I'm your tour guide over here at Elite F Cubed headquarters. And tonight, man, we are going to talk about progressive overload training at home. And so, how do we continually push ourselves and overload while training at home? And so, I mean, come on, guys. We've been training at home, right, for the last 65 days. It's been a necessity, right? It's been, something we've all had thrust upon us effectively against our wills, right? So now some of us might continue to do this moving forward. Some of us, even when the gyms reopen, might decide, I kind of like doing inverted rows underneath my kitchen table. I've kind of grown a little bit of an affinity for the Bulgarian split squat off of my ottoman. And so I think I'm going to keep doing this. Like, hey, man, you got to do you, boo. Like, don't let me stop you. You got to do what you feel right. I'll tell you what. I'm going to be back in the gym, but I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. You had better believe that I'm going to be studying out the house, the apartment, the condo, wherever we live, with at least a squat rack. So just in case the U.S. government decides to strip me of my civil liberties once again, which I have a feeling they might, at least my glutes can be a little bit striated. So, yeah, man, you had better believe this is definitely going to change things for me. Even though I'm going to be on the gym training, I'm going to be in the gym training where I love to train. But nevertheless, hey, we're in it. We're still doing it. How do we progress at home? So let's talk it out, man. So, the first thing, some at-home axioms, right? Some at-home axioms. Actually, before we do this, I would love to know, for you guys out there, you're watching, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, let me know, do you guys plan to still train at home after this is over? Right? Like in some states, gyms are reopening, right? Like some places, you can get back into the gym and get a little workout in from what I understand. Like in Illinois, I think we're looking at 2022 for that to actually happen. But in other places, I actually think it might be happening. At least I've heard this myth off in some far off land. And so, either way, I'm curious where you guys are at. Do you plan on continuing to train at home? Do you prefer to train at home? Hey, let me know down in the comments. I would love to know, where you guys are at. But some at-home axioms, man. So tonight, right, we're going to kind of talk about, how to progress, right? How to push yourself when things get too easy. Like how to, really push the envelope. But before we talk about that, let's all remember that 80%, 85%, 90% of your progress is just putting your reps in, man. It's just finding a way to get it done, right? It's just ponying up even when you don't want to, right? Getting in there even when it's not optimal, and just finding a way to put in some work even when it's not perfect, right? Like take me, for example. I don't love training at home, but I'm still finding a way, as lackluster as it might be at sometimes, to put some work on the table, right? To leave a little something out there on the field. And so really, like tonight we're going to talk about, kind of that last 10, 15, 20%. But the reality is most of your progress or lack thereof, it's really just going to be determined by how consistent you are. It's really just going to be determined by, are you putting your reps in? Like, are you getting some work done? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to get started. And so that's the basic idea, right? 80, 90% is going to be, that's the lion's share. But still, I mean, at some point, right, there's only so many air squats you can do, right? I mean, at some point, it's like, man, I'm doing 40 rep sets of air squats. I don't have any bands. I don't have any dumbbells. Or even with my bands and my dumbbells, I'm doing 40 rep sets of air squats, right? I'm doing, so many push-ups that I can't even see straight anymore. So at some point, it's like, okay, I kind of want to make these things a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult. Well, we're going to talk about that, tonight. Before we do that, or, to transition into doing that might be a better way to put it, we need to remember the tenets. Now, unfortunately, sadly, this is not a Disney movie starring Denzel, although it probably should be. But we need to remember the tenets of hypertrophy. We need to remember, the driving principles of progress in the gym. And they are, just in case we forgot, right? muscular damage, mechanical tension, and metabolic stress. These are the three pillars of hypertrophy, right? And they're basically, exactly what they sound like. You may not be able to kind of pick up metabolic stress through context clues, but muscular damage, you're doing damage to the muscle fibers. That's pretty straightforward. Mechanical tension, those are the loads on, the skeleton, right? Those are the loads on the tissue. Makes a lot of sense. Metabolic stress, that's your pump, right? Metabolic stress, that's for all the bros out there that want to do, their sets of 15, 20, 25, of cable curls just to get that last little weekend pump before we, head out the door on a Friday afternoon. Like, hey, I do the exact same thing. Well, that is one of the drivers of hypertrophy. What's interesting, though, about these drivers of hypertrophy is when we're in the gym, like under normal circumstances, we can kind of juggle all three, right? Like under normal circumstances, like we can kind of move about all three. Like it's like, okay, I'm going to focus on muscular damage. I'm going to focus on mechanical tension. I'm going to focus on metabolic stress. Now, I mean, the evidence and my own experience has kind of shown that, of those three, metabolic stress is probably the least effective of the three. Mechanical tension is probably the most effective of the three, and then muscular damage is kind of somewhere in the middle. But even still, it's like, okay, I can't just keep loading my spine, right? When I back off, when I walk out under the squat rack, I just can't keep loading it into infinity. I have to come up with other ways to tax my quads and my hams and my glutes and my posterior chain, right? Like I have to find some other ways. It can't always be mechanical tension. So we're juggling these things, right? But it's a bit of a trade-off. It's kind of like, okay, I want mechanical tension, but I don't want so much mechanical tension that I push my muscular damage into the red zone, right? That I push my muscular damage into this area where I can't recover, where I'm just stapled to the couch for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, right? Which is going to happen to every single one of us if we're not careful when we do head back into the gym in 2022. So be aware. But muscular damage, mechanical tension, metabolic stress, we're juggling all three of these guys, right? Well, when it comes to training at home, we kind of can't load our spines, right? We kind of can't, load our tissue. So the mechanical tension variable sort of gets removed a little bit. Now, we're going to talk about this at the very end tonight. It's not entirely removed. There are some things that we can do to kind of bring it back into the fold. But generally speaking, I would argue here tonight that we're focusing more on metabolic stress and muscular damage for progressing, for finding ways to make the movement harder, for, finding ways to make things a little bit more challenging. Like that's kind of what we're focusing on. So on that note, right, let's talk about a little bit of damage. Admittedly, this might be a stretch, right? Like this might be a stretch. Like you might be thinking, Jim, I tuned in tonight because I said, all right, I'll give this cat a try. And for some reason, I'm still around here 7 minutes later, but you really lost me at muscular damage when I'm training at home because ain't no band squats going to do a lot of muscular damage, right? Ain't no Bulgarian split squats off the ottoman going to do a whole lot of muscular damage. Although, actually, that probably will. And if you're saying that, you probably haven't done Bulgarian split squats with body weight off of your ottoman. But I admit, it might be a little bit of a stretch. But still, right, hear me out, right? We're all kind of trying to reach a little bit. We're trying to push, the envelope of innovation while we're training at home and trying to make this thing work. If you do new motions... actually, I probably should have titled this or labeled this differently on the PowerPoint slide. If you do the same motion, but you do it unilaterally as opposed to bilaterally, that is going to be an entirely new stimulus. That is going to elicit some level of muscular damage. And again, if you don't believe me, just give it a try, right? Case in point, the dumbbell Romanian deadlift, right? Do a dumbbell Romanian deadlift, standing on both feet, bilaterally, no problem. You can progress, you can load, you can, overload. It's all gravy. It's all just starburst and sunshine, right? But you get on one foot, you start to do this unilaterally, and now all of a sudden, it's a whole new game you're playing. all of a sudden it's like, whoa, man, I've got balance, I've got coordination, I've got a little bit of technique, my rhythm is totally off. I've got to figure out, like, do I hold both dumbbells? Do I hold one dumbbell? Do I kind of do like an across the body type job? Like, how do I do this, right? The learning curve, like, it's almost like you've got to start over. It's almost like, man, we're going to push the reset button on this guy to figure out this movement pattern that I thought I knew pretty well, right? That I thought I've been doing for months, years, right? Dumbbell Romanian deadlifts. Like, yeah, man, I got that in my sleep. Well, you get on one leg, you may not have anything. And so when you do something like that, it's going to tax your system in brand new ways. It's going to elicit some level of muscular damage. Now, is it going to be the same as, a drop set to death on bench press, to close out your chest session, obviously Monday? I don't know, right? Probably not. But again, we're reaching, right? We're all trying to we're all trying to come together, right? Alone together, and we're trying to make this thing work, right? Hashtag alone together. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is some brand new movement. So now I'm not talking about the same movement done a different way. I'm talking about a brand new movement. Here, you can find yourself being taxed in brand new ways, right? Completely brand new ways. So sticking with the hamstring theme for whatever reason, if you've never done hamstring slides before, then you, my friend, are in for a treat. So here's what a hamstring slide is. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever done a hamstring slide. I'm very curious. I had never done one until I was, quarantined and locked down. And I'm like, man, I got to train my hamstrings. And there's only so many unilateral dumbbell Romans you can do before you start exploring and trying to figure out other things to do. You lie on the ground. You lift your pelvis, glute up into like a bridge position. And then with your feet still on the ground, right? If you're on carpet, you can use like paper plates. If you're on a hardwood floor, you can use like a towel, or depending on the socks that you might be wearing, it could work with just socks. But then you just curl them in. I would love to do a demo for you guys, but I can't. And honestly, I wouldn't love to do a demo for you guys. But it's tiny back here, so I can't do that. And then I got to move all my stuff around. Definitely not going to happen. But if you do that, if you curl your legs in like that in a bridge position, like your hamstrings, they're going to be on fire. Like they are going to be like, whoa, dude, what are you doing? Like this is crazy. That's a great example of taking a movement that's not that difficult to do. Again, we're not adding any weight. We don't need any bands. Like all you need is a towel or a pair of socks, and you're fine. And it will elicit a brand new stimulus on your system, and it will cause a little bit of muscular damage. And so doing some damage, is it a reach? Yes. Is it a little bit of a stretch? Admittedly so. But, I think there might be a little something there. But all right. What about these pump chasers, man? What about metabolic stress? Like, can we stress the metabolic stress component? I think we should, right? Not only do I think we should, but I think that's kind of what we're resigned to focusing on. We are all in a situation where we're not doing heavy triples. We're not doing 5x5s, right? We're not doing AMRAP sets, not in the traditional sense of an AMRAP set, right? We're not doing anything like that. So almost everything that we do, or at least the majority of what we do, is going to be higher rep work. It's going to be sets in the 15 to 20 to 25 rep range. 12, like maybe at the minimum, right? Now, when you get into some unilateral work, or maybe you're doing like some Nordic curls or whatever, like you might be doing some lower rep sets. But generally speaking, this is kind of what we're all doing. So when you get into these higher rep sets, right, this is where metabolic stress can really take over. This is where you get the lactic acid buildup. This is where you get that pump. This is where that metabolic stress starts to kick in as a driver of hypertrophy. Now again, in terms of the food chain of hypertrophy's, functionality, let's say, it's number 3, right? I mean, it's behind tension and damage. But again, we're working with what we got, right? Beggars can't be choosers, man. I mean, all I've got is a few bands and a couple of dumbbells and an imagination. Like, that's all I've got to work with, right? So it's like, all right, let me focus on this metabolic stress component. Now, let me weave in some of the things we've talked about here, on the shred just in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I've been really focusing on the at-home thing to give you guys, some things that are very relevant to you, things that are very current, things that you can use right away. I mean, talking about the effective reps that we talked about a few weeks ago, you guys can go back wherever, well, if you're on Twitter, it might be hard to find, but if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can find it right in like the video archive there. It should pop right up for you. You know, talking about how you really need to push close to failure, right? If you really want to get the most out of these sets. Now, again, you don't necessarily have to overthink this, right? Just grip it and rip it if you want to. Just get something done and move on, and you might be just biding your time until you get back in the gym. Like, honestly, I can appreciate that because that's how I feel in a lot of ways. But still, you start to combine these things together. It's like, okay, I can do a set of 25 on air squats. I can do a set of 35 on push-ups or whatever, right? I can build up that metabolic stress component, and, you know, as long as I'm getting close enough to failure, I'm getting in some effective reps. I may not be losing as much as I think, right? Like, I may not be losing as much strength. I may not be losing as many gains, right? S or Z. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. And so these are some things that, you know, we can think about as we are trying to make this thing work while we're at home. The last thing I want us to be aware of, though, and I just talked about this last week, so you can go back and check out the rest periods guy from last week. But this idea of global fatigue and local fatigue. So this is really important because remember, when talking about rest periods, like short rest periods and long rest periods, the basic idea is longer rest periods are preferred over shorter rest periods most of the time. And that's because if you're not resting enough, just like we talked about last week, you may find that your system gets tired before you're actually able to tax the muscle in question, before you're actually able to tax the muscle fibers that you're really trying to focus on, right? Like the great example here is, you know, do sets of barbell squats anywhere near, you know, maximum output, anywhere near failure, like RPE of 5 or higher, doesn't even matter, and only rest 45 seconds between sets. You're going to be torched, right? Your system is going to be torched before your quads and your glutes and your hamstrings can get the proper stimulus, right? I would think. Here, though, since we're at home training, it's a little bit different, man. It's a little bit different because we have to do higher rep sets, right? And we might be kind of deconditioned to doing higher rep sets, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't used to doing sets of 30 on air squats. Even though it's only air squats, even though I don't even have the bar on my back, I get to 25 and I'm like, I'm kind of gassed, right? I mean, it's a little bit different. I've improved a little bit now in 64 days or whatever, but in the beginning, it's like, man, this is not that easy. I thought this was going to be super easy. It's actually not that easy. So the idea of global and local fatigue, I honestly wouldn't focus on that too heavily when it comes to what we're trying to do here now, because, you know, the rest period discussion that I did last week is probably a little bit more relevant for those of you guys out there that are able to get back in the gym. Because, you know, training at home, you know, it's really just going to be, hey, you know, kind of do what you want. Kind of do what you enjoy. Like, I personally, I like to rest really long between sets. I'm curious, you guys training at home, how long are you guys resting between sets? Like, let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. Are you guys moving, like, super fast? Like, 30 seconds between sets? Like, 40 seconds between sets? Just to get it done? Like, I started doing that. I hate training like that. Like, I despise it. Like, it made me wake up in the mornings. I didn't even want to train. And, I mean, I love training. In the gym, at home, right? In a barn. It doesn't make a difference. I love it. But, man, moving that quickly? I'm like, man, I can't even collect my thoughts. Like, you want me to do another set? I don't care if it is air squats. I'm like, I need a minute. I need a second. I need like 4 minutes. Like, give me a second to just collect myself. And so I actually, a couple of weeks ago, I started resting much longer between sets, even the super high rep ones, and it's made a world of difference for me. So when it comes to your rest periods and kind of the global local fatigue situation, I wouldn't worry about it too heavily when it comes to training at home. I mean, those of you that really want to try to optimize your training, and I know some of my audience, the people that I attract, you know, you guys want to do that. I think that's phenomenal. Then weave in some of the things that we talked about last week. But for the rest of us mere mortals, I don't know that we need to worry about that per se. So, all right, so let me give you guys a couple of action items that will get you guys on your way tonight. So this is it, man. Let damage and stress carry you, right? Leave the tension on the shelf for just a brief second, because we're about to take it off here with the second bullet point. But mostly, let the damage and let the stress carry you. However, if you really want to make your movements harder, and you don't want to do super high rep stuff, which this would be a very fair, you know, valid line of reasoning. You're thinking, man, I'm done with these 50 sets of air squats. well, then I would encourage you to start using some intensity techniques. I would encourage you to start using things like paused reps, where you pause in the hole of a squat, where you pause in the hole of a push-up, where you pause in the hole of a chair dip, right? Your triceps, your shoulders, your hands are going to be on fire. You pause in the hole of a chair dip. So that's a great example of an intensity technique. Use 1.5 reps, right? Do a full rep, then do a half rep, and count that as 1. Do a full rep, then do a half rep, count that as 2. Right? You can see, mixing in partial reps in between your full reps can really allow you to, tax the muscles in new ways. And then lastly, BFR, man, blood flow restriction. Like, you guys know I love blood flow restriction. Like, if you guys have followed any of my stuff on social media, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, you guys have seen me do a lot of BFR stuff over the years. Like, I love using BFR for legs. I love using BFR for arms. But hey, man, get creative, right? You don't have to just use BFR for legs or BFR for arms. Use BFR for chest, right? Wrap up your arms, do some push-ups, right? Like, you're going to be torched. Wrap up your arms, do some rows. You're going to be fried, right? Like, you can just get a little creative. I mean, you can buy the tourniquets off of Amazon for like $7 or $8. And so they're really not that expensive at all. And so, I don't know, man. My hope is that this gave you guys some ideas. My hope is that this gave you guys some insights, towards your at-home training, to where you're thinking, all right, like, yeah, I'm going to focus on metabolic stress. I'm not going to stress about this too much. My gym is going to be open in the next couple of weeks, or, whatever the case may be. And we're doing it, man. We're 60 days in and we're doing it, right? Maybe you haven't done as well as you would have liked, or, maybe you've held the line. In either scenario, it's going to be very short-lived in the grand scheme of things. In either scenario, right? I mean, let's all turn to Og Mandino, and let me drop a "this too shall pass" on you guys, because it is true. We're going to get through this, and we're going to see this thing through to the other side. And so that's it for the shred tonight, man. You guys are amazing. If you made it this far into the shred, then you guys are like triply amazing, man. If you want to share this wherever you are, that would really help me out a lot. If you want to hit me with a like or a subscribe or whatever is appropriate for the platform that you're on, that would also help me out a lot. If you want to drop down into the description and scoop up some free stuff, you can grab the fat loss formula, you can grab the cardio plan. Like, I've got a bunch of stuff down there, and I've got links to the podcast and the YouTube channel and all that stuff. So that is the weekly shred. That is all she wrote. I will see you guys next week, when I will be 1 year older and 1 year wiser. So we will see you guys then.